What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my anime art channel, and for today's video we're going to be drawing Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta. I also wanted to give you a sneak peek at my new anime art drawing app that's going to be dropping on the Google Play Store in 2 weeks. This is a beta version with just one drawing of Goku, but it should give you a good idea of what the app is going to look like. I'm also going to be creating a category section that lets you filter the tutorials by choosing the name of the anime that you're interested in. With all that being said, let's get started with today's tutorial. This time we'll start with the crease between his eyes, drawing it just below the center of the cube. For his left eye, we'll start with the eyebrow. Notice that the width of his eyebrow increases as we work our way to the outside. Also notice that we're not using any straight lines here. Everything has a slight curve to it. Now we'll use the same process to draw his right eye. We'll begin drawing the top of his nose slightly off center and directly beneath the crease between his eyes. His mouth is going to be directly below his nose and will span the distance between the corners of his eyes. Now let's go ahead and define the outside of his face. His jawline is going to curve in near the center of his nose. Finally, we'll add some extra details below and above his eyes. His ears are going to be a bit bigger than usual, but try not to go overboard. The last thing we have to do for his face is draw his hairline. There's also going to be a long hair going off the corner of his face. Alright, now we can move on to drawing his collar. At this point we're still able to make use of our cube, so this part should be pretty simple. Later on, we're going to need to use some hand-eye coordination in order to draw everything accurately, and things might get a bit complicated, especially the more you move down his body and the further away from the cube that you get. For his hair, we're going to use curved lines for the most part, but notice that we're also going to be using some straight lines along the top of his hair. Alright, so if we've drawn everything properly, the top of his hair should touch the top of the page. Try to use up as much space near the top as possible, otherwise you're going to cut him off at the knees once you start working on his lower body. Check out the description for this video if you want to know the exact measurements that I'm using on this paper. That way you'll have a much better idea of where to place the cube and how big the cube should be. So for anyone following along to this video, I just want to let you know that I did make a mistake here. It's not evident now, but okay. So if you're following along to this video, try to watch it through to the end first, because I did make him a fraction of a centimeter too wide on his left side. And it looks fine now, but once I start drawing his pants, you'll see what I mean. He's gonna look like he put on 50 pounds. So what you should do is draw his abs a fraction of a centimeter to the right, The reason I made the mistake in the first place is because I'm drawing on a flat surface, and I drew this picture from beginning to end without stopping to, take a look at it. And when I finished completely, I was like, something's wrong, something's off. And after I look at it for another couple of minutes, then I realized, like, okay, I got to redraw the whole left side of his body. And it's like, so to avoid that sort of mistake, I highly recommend that you just draw on a slanted surface. It's not that hard to do. The reason I can't do it is just because of the way that my studio is set up and my lighting and my tripod. It's a big pain in the butt, but it does lead to mistakes like this, which is why I'm supposed to stop every 15-20 minutes and just make sure that I drew everything accurately and go back to drawing on a flat surface. So yeah, just for your information, I highly recommend not drawing on a flat table. Just try to have some sort of curved plane, slanted plane that you're drawing on. So ladies and gentlemen, for today's tutorial we are going to be learning how to draw Gogeta Blue Fat Mode. He's starting to look a little bit like Thor from the second Infinity Wars movie. He's on his way there. For the cloth that's wrapped around his waist, we're going to use a lot of straight lines to help create the shape. And try not to stray too far above his hairline. His boots might look a little bit thin here, but once I turn him back into skinny Gogeta, everything should look fine. Alright, so getting the shape of his left leg was definitely the biggest challenge for me for this drawing. It might take you a couple tries to do it. Alright, so let's go ahead and help our guy lose a couple pounds. It looks like I only need to worry about correcting his abs and his left arm and leg. If you're happy with the way your picture looks, then you don't have to worry about this part. Just go ahead and move on to the coloring process. Alright, now that looks like Gogeta. Before we move on to the coloring process though, we still have to draw some extra details in his hair. I went over these lines with a pencil first, and I highly recommend you do the same to minimize the chance of a mistake. Notice that there are no straight lines here, all of them are going to be curved. That way they help to add to the shape of the hair, rather than conflicting with the different angles that we created earlier. Before coloring, let's go ahead and clean up the leftover graphite using our charcoal eraser. The first layer of color that we're going to put on his face is E000. This is going to cover all of his skin, leaving no white spots. The second layer is going to be E00. We're going to leave some patches of the previous color untouched so that we can give the effects of highlights on his face. The third and final color we're going to layer with is going to be E11, and this is mostly going to color the middle of his face. Now we're done with the markers, but we've still got some work to do, because we're going to create some shadows on his face as well using a color pencil. This is going to be the darkest umber color that you can find, as in not gray or black, but just the darkest brown that you have in your color pencil kit. Finally, we're going to use a solid brown color pencil to add some complexity to our darkest shade of marker. Now let's create our first layer of color on his hair using our B00 marker. Notice that we're leaving some patches of the hair untouched so that we can create some highlights. Take note of the way that I'm laying down the color with the marker. I'm only using the very tip of the marker in order to create very sharp, accurate strokes with the ink or with the color. So wherever you start, that's going to be the thickest layer of color, and going up, it's going to get thinner and thinner. Alright, now it's time to lay down some ink on his hair. If I could do it again, I'd probably just do the outline with an ink pen and then color the inside with black Copic marker, but I think it looks fine if you just ink the whole thing too. Alright, we're going to add one more layer of blue to his hair, and that's going to be B24. We're going to leave the original white highlights completely untouched, and we're not going to completely go over that lighter shade of blue that we put down earlier. We'll leave some of that intact, that way we create a little bit more complexity in the color scheme, and it's going to make our drawing a lot more interesting. Alright, now we're just going to take the process that we used for his face and his neck and apply it to the rest of his skin. First we'll lay down 3 layers of marker, then we'll add a little bit more depth to it by using our 2 color pencils. Alright, we're done with the skin, so now we're going to move on to coloring his jacket, his wrist weights, and his boots, starting with our lightest color, BV00. Now we're going to use a pencil to create an outline before we lay down our ink. Now we'll use our darker color of purple to add another layer of shade, and go over that again with C6. And we'll repeat the same process a few more times. Alright, so for his belt, or whatever that is, we're going to use a similar process to what we've been using so far, which is to start with an outline using ink and then color it in with a darker color. But this time, instead of inking it in, we're going to use our, I think it's, C10 Copic marker. And be careful with the brush strokes because you don't want to leave a giant blob. So try to start in the center of the area that you're inking and then brush your way outward, because that way you'll get much thinner and better looking lines. Now, using a similar process for his hair, we're going to go over our belt with B00 and we're going to leave some white patches in order to give the impression of some highlights. We're going to layer over our first color, this time using B45. Alright, let's get to work on his jacket again and go over with our second layer of yellow. This time we'll use Y08. Now we just need to use a few color pencils to shade in the darker regions. There's a few smaller lines I need to draw on his pants, and then we'll go ahead and get to work on coloring. We're going to use a pencil to give us the general shape of the area we're going to color, and then go over it with our N7 Copic marker. For most of this process, we won't need to rely on our pencil. We only need to do that when there's a very odd shape and you don't want to risk coloring it incorrectly with the marker. Alright, for this area of his pants, we'll use our pencil to create an outline one more time. Alright, now let's go over his pants with a lighter shade of gray, and for that we'll use our N1 marker. For the final layer of color, we're going to use our silver color pencil. Just as before, we're going to leave some patches of white to help create a highlight effect on the pants. So we're pretty much finished now. I just need to go over some of the areas with a black pen, but you don't need to watch that. I'll go ahead and show you the final product. Alright guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.